Cool Figure TV. Revolutionary salute. Revolutionary salute. Like, share, subscribe. Welcome to the House of Revolution. You know I'm your humble host. The Yao Mean of Revolution and Trump's war with Venezuela is to begin any hour now. It'll be any minute now, any day now. Before we get into that, be sure to wipe y'all feet. That means hit the like button. You in the House of Revolution. Like, share, subscribe, support the platform, y'all. We got to get into this information. Trump is bought and paid for, and he wants World War III. Let's get into the content. Salute.
Well, let's talk about Victoria Sharks. Let's talk about what's happening right now as we approach war with Venezuela. It looks like it is imminent. President Trump holding a meeting in a few hours to iron out the next military moves against Venezuela. This comes as President Trump over the weekend, of course, closed the airspace over Venezuela, tweeted or posted on Truth Social. He said, hey, all you people, watch out. No one's allowed to fly over Venezuela anymore. And you can see what it looks like right now. No one's allowed to fly. By the way, a little side note there, you know, all of those repatriation flights where you're getting rid of like illegal immigrants in the United States, because Nicolas Maduro was open to those flights coming in from the United States, getting illegal immigrants out of the United States into Venezuela. Those flights are also stopping. So they'll, I guess, just remain here. Okay. So that sort of violates everything that Trump ran on, but okay. So that's going to happen. Meanwhile, right now, Venezuelans say that these large bombers have also entered their airspace, strategic bombers, the USB-52H. Venezuela says this is a violation of their sovereignty, coming across their borders without authorization, flying over right now. So no one else can fly there, but these bombers can fly there right now. And a few hours ago, according to the Miami Herald, President Trump gave Maduro basically a final ultimatum. Leave now. You can take your wife with you. You can take your son with you, but you have to get out. We'll offer you safe passage. It seems like he's turned that offer down. He doesn't plan to go anywhere. He did offer apparently to the Trump administration for the opposition to take over the government, but that he and his inner circle would still have control of the military. Not exactly sure how all of that would work. We got some sense of exactly why this is happening and this is unfolding in the way it is. And we're going to get to all of that and more, but I want to bring in Colonel Dan Davis, host of the Deep Dive with Colonel Davis. Always great to have you here on the show, Colonel. Hope you had a wonderful Thanksgiving. Thanks for being here.
We did. Thanks for asking, Clayton.
Great to have you here. So just from a military perspective, Colonel, so much to unpack here, and I really want to spend the bulk of the show because I think this is the biggest story right now, and I really want to deep dive this separate from the normal propaganda and like the CNN, Fox News sort of talking points about all of this and cut through all of it. Before we get into all of that, though, the airspace question from a military, strategic military perspective, when he closes down the airspace, what does that signal to you as a colonel? Well, what do you think is coming next?
Yeah, well, it signals that he's just basically just clearing the decks and saying, all right, well, whenever I decide to take action, I want to make sure that there's no possibility for civilians to be hit or any kind of collateral damage. And then, of course, it's also simultaneously a very strong message to Maduro himself to say, hey, no, I am deadly serious about this. We've already had several iterations of B-2 bomber overflights, practice runs, et cetera. So it seems to be building and ramping up. And so I'm sure that that's the primary purpose of this was, unfortunately, I think probably the protecting civilians is a secondary issue, but primarily I think it's to communicate the seriousness of this, that President Trump is saying basically leave, or pretty soon it's going to not be a dry run, but a hot run. And I think that's probably what was intended, and we'll see what happens.
So what do you think, what do you think is happening right now at the Pentagon? We know that President Trump in just a few short hours is going to be meeting with his team to make the next steps here. It seems like all of this is coming to a head, could be imminent. I mean, I don't use that word lightly. It seems like it's imminent. What do you sense?
Yeah, that's exactly my feel. I mean, my sincere hope is that this will just be much ado about nothing, and that we'll take a lot of actions and a lot of words, and that no violence follows. I mean, that's what I hope. But as we always said in the military, hope is not a method. So I doubt, my gut tells me that it's not going to be avoided. And you ask about what the Pentagon was doing. I mean, they're doing what they always do, is preparing for action. And if the president says that this is something he's considering, then what we can expect based on all the things that have happened, all the firepower that's been moved into the region over a period of time, is that they have been conducting rehearsals. They've been saying, all right, here's what we're going to do. They've been planning it, probably doing computer simulations, just over and over rehearsing what the different parts would be. War gaming, what happens if this doesn't work right? What if that happens instead? What are the different reactions that the other side could do? And then what would be our counteractions? And then they probably just continue to war game that out. And if they need to change any assets or resources, they'll get that. That's what I expect the military to be doing. But that's just the operational aspect. The bigger questions to me is, where are you going with this? What is the attainable military objective? And we can't fail to also ask the legality questions. How is this in conjunction with the United States Constitution, with the 1973 War Powers Act? You cannot possibly rationally make the argument that we have been attacked, which the administration has tried to do. We have been attacked by these narco-terrorists because we designated that name on them. Somehow that makes it okay to just kill them whenever we feel like it. There's no truth to it. It's paper thin, but yet that appears to be what we've been doing. I mean, I know you're going to talk about the boat strikes, et cetera, separately, but they are definitely connected with this. And the same kind of mentality that went into that seems to be getting ready to go into a much larger strike that there's even less justification for. And what are you going to do if it goes sideways? What are you going to do if it's not a nice, clean, easy operation, like apparently Lindsey Graham and several of the other folks who are for this are saying it's going to be a layup? Lindsey Graham said a couple of weeks ago. It's not, and it could go disastrously wrong. What are you going to do then? This could get us sucked into something that we're just not prepared for.
Yeah, I mean, a lot to unpack there, and I want to go through each of these points that you just brought up. They're all great. But on the last point, the Lindsey Graham point, that this is going to be a cakewalk, a no-brainer, easy as pie, you've warned for years that Washington underestimates the cost, the complexity, the sacrifice, the duration of these military interventions, whether it's Afghanistan or Iraq or whatever it is. Do we want to administer Venezuela? Do we want to be in control of Venezuela? And I don't know that they have any kind of an exit strategy for this.
We barely have an entrance strategy. I don't see any evidence that there's an exit strategy, because for that to even exist, you have to know what you want to accomplish and what the ultimate objective is. What do you want the end state to look like? I think other than Maduro gone, I don't think there is one. I mean, there certainly hadn't been anything communicated. And so what that means is that they'll be doing it on the fly, like so many of these other missions that you just referenced here a second ago, that just is anguishing to me. Because how many times do we have to relearn the same lesson? That if you don't have an objective, if you don't know where you want to end up before you take step one, then you're going to end up just drifting around, and you're going to end up killing a lot of people on the ground. Almost certainly you're going to get some Americans killed for no value to our country. And it's certainly, at the best case, going to cost a lot of money. And I don't see it really turning out in any kind of positive thing for the United States. And by the way, you also have to keep in mind what this looks like to our reputation throughout the world, especially in our hemisphere. This makes us look like the thugs, the bullies. I hate to use those terms with my country, but that's what it makes us look like, that we used to condemn when we even talked about what China might do, et cetera, what the Russians might do. We are about to do something that has no justification, and everybody in the region knows this is a pure power play, that President Trump just doesn't like Maduro, doesn't want him in power, is unwilling to take the many deals that Maduro has allegedly offered, which could have forestalled violence. It just looks like President Trump wants to get into a war. And as you've said several times on your show, he campaigned on not doing that. And now it looks like we're literally on the edge of doing it. And again, I just hope that somebody on his inner circle says, Mr. President, don't do this.
Well, you bring up a couple of great points. And of course, back in 2024, President Trump was pretty forthright in his discussions about Venezuela. This video has now kind of gone viral over the past 24 hours, where the president is saying, during my first term, this shouldn't have happened. We're now buying oil from a narco-terrorist, a dictator. And if I were president, and what we were trying to do was, basically have regime change where we would get this oil for free. And so it seems like that's the plan. As someone in our chat room just said, the plan is liberate the oil. And Representative Maria Salazar this morning on Fox and Friends basically let the cat out of the bag, confirming this, plan is all for oil. Watch.
This is not going to be hard. 80% of the Venezuelans voted for the opposition. You have 8 million Venezuelans in exile. We're talking about the largest reserves of oil in the world that will be doing business with the American oil companies. And that is something that I have made very sure that they understand. American companies in Venezuela for the next 100 years.
All right. So that's the plan. Yeah, you heard it here. She says you heard it right here. Like, that's what's going to happen. It's imminent. This is coming. This is about to happen. A United States member of Congress letting the cat out of the bag that this is all about oil, just like it was about weapons of mass destruction in Iraq. Now it's about narco boats in Venezuela. It's not about that. It's about the oil in both counts, right?
Where is the justification for that? And I'm frankly sick and tired of hearing all this statement about, Maduro was not legally elected. Well, okay, maybe they are, maybe they wasn't. What does that matter to you? What does it matter to us? We don't have the authority. No one said, okay, America, you get to patrol the world. And if somebody doesn't get elected according to your standards, you can kill them. You can drive them out. There is no such authority, of course. That's something for the Venezuelan people to figure out. If 80% of them genuinely voted for the opposition and Maduro kept power, that's something they have to solve inside their borders within their country. It is not ours to do. And to insert ourselves into this anyway means that there is no rule of law, Clayton. There's no rule of law if we take this, because then it's just power politics and power dissemination that we do whatever the hell we want to do, and you either get out of the way or you get killed. I'm sorry to be that firm about it, but that's what it will be if we take this action. There is no legal or moral justification for this.
Wait, so in 2020, when we had the problems we had in our election, Dominion voting machines and all of that, Venezuela should have been involved in our elections, right? I mean, they should have been.
If only they had thought about that in time. You're right. They could have solved that problem.
And when they installed Kamala Harris.
Right. I mean, where was Venezuela? They have a right to be meddling in our elections. This is not what the American people signed up for. I mean, militarily, though, Colonel, what do you think as the Pentagon is ramping up, they're planning all of this from a land invasion perspective? I mean, we've heard what a disaster that's going to be. And we're hearing reports on the Venezuelan side. What they're preparing for is a guerrilla style scattering across the country approach to try and thwart our invasion here. What do you make of that strategy? What are you hearing on that side of things? And how disastrous would it be?
If they have paid any attention at all to Afghanistan over our disastrous 20 years, they'll see that we came in there and after just a few months, literally destroyed and annihilated the Taliban government and military, destroyed them utterly. But we didn't kill every individual because they did. They scattered throughout the mountains and stuff. And so over time, they were able to get together in these bands, and then they started this guerrilla warfare, which, of course, they had done with the Mujahideen under the Soviet Union, et cetera, which we helped provide for. And if these guys have paid any attention at all, and if anybody has looked at the terrain inside Venezuela, it is absolutely premium territory to conduct that kind of an operation. And you were just begging yourself to get into another insurgency that you can't win. And for the same reasons we couldn't win the one in Afghanistan. And we've got such a small amount of troops in the meantime. Let me touch on this for a second. There's a lot of firepower, a lot of jets with the Gerald R. Ford and several missile carriers, destroyers. You can blow up a lot of stuff. You can kill a lot of people, but there's a really small, I think less than 10,000 total troops. And I think a lot fewer of that of Marines that can actually do anything on the ground. You can seize a location and, maybe you can do a snatch and grab or something like that if you find Maduro, and I can't imagine he would be lightly defended. But you can't invade anything. All you can do is blow a bunch of stuff up. And then what are you going to do, Clayton? What are you going to do if Maduro doesn't get killed or he doesn't give it up? And he stays hidden somewhere and he goes into the mountains to God knows where and runs this. Now, what are you going to do? You put the credibility and the United States on the line. You've killed a lot of people already, and there is no achievable military objective. This could go wrong so many ways. And I hope some At the highest levels of our government are telling President Trump this has almost no chance to work out to our advantage, and 100 different ways it could go bad.
Well, you got these neocons surrounding him. You got the likes of Senator Lindsey Graham, who plays golf with President Trump, telling him it's going to be a cakewalk. You warmongers that are surrounding the president, and then you have you have officials that came out this morning saying it's not going to stop with Venezuela. It will stop. We'll go to Colombia and Cuba next. So what the hell are we doing?
Yeah, I mean, when I heard that about Colombia, I was just almost sick because, listen, this is not Panama. Like somebody said, well, this will be like Panama or with Noriega, et cetera, from the Bush and the Reagan administration. No, it's not. This is not Panama. And now you're talking about expanding into Colombia. I mean, what the hell is wrong with these people? Have they not paid any attention to what has happened with these guerrilla wars, especially in Colombia, and how that's fought? They have experience of doing that. Now, you want to turn those against Americans? You want to put 50, 60, 100,000 American troops to try and do another no-win situation? And why do you want to add Cuba into that? Why is that even in the conversation? I've been to Cuba, and I went on a religious trip once to try to help the people, and they are so poor. They represent a threat to no one. Why do we even talk about that? That's part, whether it's neocon or somebody else, Clayton, this is part of a sickness that I think has to be purged, or they're going to take us all into a place that's going to be killing a lot of people who wore a uniform like I did, and that just angers me and grieves me.
Well, I mean, forget the Cubans for a second. The Venezuelans pose no threat to us. This whole argument, this total bullshit argument that they're, narco terrorists are coming to the United States. Give me a break. That's, as Senator Rand Paul pointed out, that's a total lie. And they're using it as a justification to push us to manufacture consent for war. So none of these people,
paper thin.
I mean, how many Americans watching right now wake up in the morning like, man, the Venezuelans are coming? No.
Yeah. Or how many family members of our service members wake up and go, golly, if my service member, if my husband, if my father, if my son has to sacrifice his life to die in some mountain in Venezuela, that's good because, wait, there's no because. No, not one of them is going to be. They would be anguish beyond compare if you're going to send them in there to die for nothing, much less the Venezuela. I think you said you're going to talk to somebody there. I'll be real eager to watch that. Why should one Venezuelan die? Because I don't know, have this obsession with getting Maduro out or so. It's immoral, flat out.
100%. And then we're going to talk about the legal implications of this in a moment with Daniel McAdams from the Ron Paul Institute to dive more deeply into that on the legal side of things. Because again, the legal justification now is, they've attacked the United States. Really? Where have they attacked the United States? Hey, seal our border and yes, get rid of illegal immigrants in the United States. Absolutely. They're criminals in the United States. But I will admit, and I think some of the propaganda did work a little bit. Certainly it worked on me a little bit. But I woke up and I now see the lies they were spinning here on this whole thing, which was Tren de Aragua is right around the corner from you. It's the greatest threat. No one ever heard of Tren de Aragua before. Now suddenly it's the largest. No. What about the Mexican drug cartels? What about right? But no, it's Tren de Aragua is the greatest threat to the United States. I see what they did. We're not stupid. Colonel Davis, always great to see you. Thrilled that you had a great Thanksgiving. Thank you for this perspective. We're going to be watching this closely because, as you point out, it does look like this is imminent. Thank you as always. Away, according to the Washington Post, this AI gear that will last you season after season. My son has one. He wears it all the time. He's outside riding his bikes, dirt bikes with his friends up in the mountains, and he wears the bearskin hoodie. He's got his own. He's got a nice blue one, like a navy blue one that he wears all the time. So right here is what you need to do to get 60% off. Perfect for the holidays. Just text the word redacted to 36912. Again, that's redacted to 36912. And they'll text you a link so you can lock in your 60% off before the sale disappears. Don't wait till the weather gets really bad. Grab a bearskin while this Cyber Monday, Black Friday deal is still live right now. Oh, and one more thing. When you support Bearskin, you're also supporting the Fallen Outdoors and the Hope for the Warriors Veterans Program. So you're not just buying great gear, you're backing a cause that matters. Grab your Bearskin while this Black Friday deal is still live. I love how Black Friday now spills into Cyber Monday. Text the word redacted to 36912 and you'll be taken care of. Well, Secretary of War Pete Hegseth doubling down on those attacks on those Venezuelan shipping boats, those fishing boats or whatever they're calling them narco boats, right? Narco terrorism boats. That's the word. And this morning or last night, Pete Hegseth tweeted this: for your Christmas wish list, this AI generated Franklin targets narco terrorists. I think, by the way, isn't Franklin like a Canadian turtle? I think it's like a Canadian kids lineup. So that's funny, right? So many people ratioed him in the comments saying this is not funny at all. This is what we're doing now with no justification and no proof at all that we are being attacked as a result of these boats. Well, the Washington Post published this piece. Hegseth order on first Caribbean boat strike, officials say, kill them all. As two men clung to a stricken, burning ship targeted by Navy SEAL Team 6, the Joint Special Operations Commander followed the Defense Secretary's order to leave no survivors. So that first strike took out the boat, and then as these survivors are swimming away, another strike killed those individuals swimming away. According to the Washington Post, Secretary of Defense Hegseth gave the verbal order to kill anyone who survives a first strike.
Yeah, I can't have anybody to talk.
Yeah, can't have anybody at all to talk because we need to make sure that there's no voices, right? We got to take them all out. So President Trump was asked about this on Air Force One, and his response was weird because at first he said he didn't know anything about it, but then he went on to say basically he knew all about it. I don't know. Here was President Trump's response to this. Watch.
I don't know that happened. And Pete said he did not want them. He didn't even know what people were talking about. So we'll look into it. But no, I wouldn't have wanted the second strike. The first strike was very lethal. It was fine. And if there were two people around, but Pete said that didn't happen. Does that mean I have great confidence. You say no second strike? I don't know. I'm going to find out about it. But Pete said he did not order the death of those two men.
Do you have any concerns about how those boat strikes have been carried out at all?
Very little, because you can see the boats, you can see the drugs in the boats, and each boat is responsible for killing 25,000 Americans. So they're doing an amazing job. And, we're getting.
So I don't know anything about it, but I know everything about it. Pete said he didn't authorize the killing of those individuals. Okay. Well, Karen Levitt was asked about it today. So was refuting the Secretary of War his position on this? Like, what's the truth in all of this story? It seems like they're throwing Admiral Bradley under the boat, so to speak. Listen to her response.
So that's why you've seen a drastic difference in this administration's policy with respect to the last, and it's one of the many reasons the American public reelected this president and support this Secretary of War in conducting these strikes.
So to be clear, to clarify, Admiral Bradley was the one who gave that order for a second strike.
And he was well within his authority to do so.
And a separate question, the president several days ago said it was his intention to.
So he gave the order for that second strike. Okay. Let's bring in Daniel McAdams now, from the Ron Paul Institute and host of the Liberty Report. Great to see you, sir. Welcome back to the show, as always.
No, thanks for having me back. It's always great to join you guys.
So from a libertarian perspective, a legal perspective, what authority does Secretary of War, the President of the United States, have to carry out these extrajudicial killings of these narco boats off the coast of Venezuela? Like, just from a legal perspective, what authority do you think they have?
Well, they're non-combatants, even if they were carrying drugs, and we've seen no proof they are carrying drugs. People have commented it's awfully strange to see 10 or 11 guys on a boat taking up so much space that it could be used taking up with drugs. But even if they were, they're not combatants according to the laws of war. And it's ironic because the same people who rightly criticize President Obama for his drone strikes, his drone strike Tuesdays, who am I going to take out this week, are silent on this or encouraging it. And in fact, Clayton, the thing is that the this double strike is very, very serious, and it looks like an admission of war crimes. That's probably why poor old Admiral Bradley is now on the hook for the whole thing, even though Hegseth was taking a lot of credit for it. The idea of shooting at a shipwreck is considered so egregious that it actually is in the Law of War Manual of the Department of Defense. It's section 18.3.2.1, where it specifically points out, for example, orders to fire upon the shipwrecked would be clearly illegal. That's in the Pentagon's own manual. So it's a textbook case, according to their own rules, of doing something completely egregious and illegal. They have got some serious problems on their hands right now.
I'm pulling this right up here. This is the Department of Defense Law of War Manual. The requirement to refuse or to comply with orders to commit law or war violations applies to orders to perform conduct that is clearly illegal, or orders that subordinate knows in fact are illegal. For example, orders to fire upon the shipwrecked would be clearly illegal. I mean, you couldn't get more specific than that. Shipwrecked, do not fire. You've blown up their ship. Now they're shipwrecked. This is a war crime to then fire on those individuals. So whoever ordered it, it's a war crime. And I guess the Department of War, the Defense Law War Manual, specifically saying it is incumbent upon these sailors to say no, that would be a war crime, sir. We cannot, under the Department of Defense Law War Manual that I signed as a cadet or whatever, I'm not allowed to carry this out. This is a war crime, sir. I'm sorry, I won't do that. Because if it would go to a court-martial, it wouldn't be the sailor that gets in trouble. It would be the commander, no?
It would be. And I mean, and according to Nuremberg, the Geneva Conventions, even if you want to go beyond the Law of War Manual, I mean, there's a reason these things are in place. And it's not just to protect foreigners, it's also to protect Americans who may find themselves in similar situations. So I think a lot of this tempest in a teapot over the so-called seditious six, of course, the Democrats are trying to make political points on this. They frankly don't give a damn about the laws of war either. They're trying to make political points, but they essentially are making a good point. You are obligated to refuse to carry out illegal orders, and blowing boats out of the water without due process is frankly unconstitutional on its face, and it's illegal. It's an illegal act. And the fact that someone like Pete Hegseth is glorifying it, is putting out children's cartoons with them blowing up people on boats, is really beneath the dignity of the office. And we've had some people in that office that are pretty undignified, right? Yeah. We've had Austin, we've had Rumsfeld, we had Cheney, we've had some undignified people, but they look like great statesmen compared to the person who's currently occupying that position.
You know, dead men tell no tales, right? It's the Pirates of the Caribbean, you know. And so when I see the manufacturing of consent for war, because, you know, people in the chat will be like, oh, don't be a snowflake. These are narco terrorists. Okay, prove it. Number one, show me the evidence. Show me that they're any kind of a threat to the United States at all. Show me that we want to send men and women of the United States military to die for this propaganda. But they're of no threat to the United States at all, as Senator Rand Paul has pointed out. But the point seems to be, the manufacturing of consent for war seems to be that if none of these people can tell a tale, they're all killed, then our manufacturing consent for war works, right? We can say they're heading for Miami right now with all of this fentanyl. It's going to kill 25,000 Americans. But if none of them are alive, then we don't know, right? It's the same, you know, it's like these guys, it's like Thomas Crooks. Like Thomas Matthew Crooks, right? These people, oh, sorry, they're not alive anymore. We can tell about it. So we'll just tell you at the Pentagon what the truth is, right?
Well, the U.S. has lost its proxy war with Russia and Ukraine. That's very, very clear now. And so what they're doing is they're careful not to take on another peer enemy, a peer adversary. And clearly some guys in a boat, whether or not they have drugs in the boat, are not peer adversaries. So they can take a big W in the ledger sheet. They can compare it to Panama whatsoever and put in a quick win. But, you know, I spent a lot of time around neocons in D.C., trust me, and I know how they operate. And they've got President Trump's ear. They've backed him in a corner, as they always do. They did it very easily to Bush to George W. Bush after 9/11. Mr. President, this is going to be a cakewalk. It'll be an easy thing to do. Don't worry about it. The war will pay for itself. They are relentless. They never back down. And that's why it's so disturbing that Trump has so many neocons, including people like Marco Rubio, whose entire life's purpose is to overthrow the governments of Venezuela and Cuba. That's his life purpose. And you can imagine the constant haranguing of President Trump. And now he's backed into a corner. What's he going to do? I mean, I'm not a military person, but you can only leave the troops and the equipment out there for so long because they're at up tempo. They can't sustain that for this long before you have to do something. And that's when they've got him. Mr. President, you're going to look weak if you don't do something. You can't just put your tail between your legs and go home and we'll be defeated by Venezuela. Think about the midterm elections. Think about what the Democrats will do. It's a disaster of their own making.
You know, you've warned for years about emergency powers or temporary emergency powers, something you and Congressman Ron Paul, Dr. Ron Paul have talked about a lot because they always seem to become permanent. Do you see this like new maritime policy as another example of like the militarization of law enforcement under the like a banner of national security? We've got new maritime laws that give the president these extrajudicial killing powers.
Well, and Pam Bondi said she's putting in the National Guard in every city in America. So, yes, it definitely is expanding the militarization of our police everywhere. And of course, future administrations will love having this power. They'll love the fact that, you know, they loved it after the Patriot Act. President Obama loved the Patriot Act. He loved using it against American citizens. And the same thing will happen with this. But, you know, the thing, Clayton, is that the same people who rightly complained about the floods of refugees, and we've seen what happened now with the tragic shooting over the weekend, this fellow who was trained to kill by the CIA, who was trained to be a ruthless killer. Well, because he helped us, we let him in. And what did he do? He practiced his trade as a ruthless killer. You think that we're not training ruthless killers in Venezuela as we speak to perform the same tasks? If you don't want a flood of people, some of whom may be ruthless killers, then the answer is to stop engaging in this neocon regime change wars because it only produces rotten fruits.
Well, we know the CIA has been active, to your point, very active in Venezuela, confirmed multiple times, and we've confirmed it separately here on the show. And so they've been in there, of course, running drugs. The only drugs that are really coming out of Venezuela are being run by the CIA. And the people, these narco terrorists, the reason we pretend to know that there's narco terrorists there is because we trained them, for crying out loud. It's hilarious how this works, isn't it?
And the idea that this is a war against narco-terrorism, and many of us who are appalled by what's happening in our inner cities with drug use, it's been completely undercut by President Trump himself with the pardon of one Orlando Hernandez, who brought in, 400 tons of cocaine flooding the streets of the United States. And President Trump has just pardoned him. And, you know, one of the other things about this, Clayton, is that this is not simply about the war on drugs. A lot of it has to do with the so-called Isaac Accords. And that is all of Latin America getting on board to support Israel first. And that was started, of course, by Milei in Argentina, who said he's moving his capital, of course, to Jerusalem. Machado, the Nobel Peace Prize winning person waiting in the wings in Venezuela, has also said the exact same thing. And the same is true in Chile, I believe, and probably now in Honduras, that the election appears to have been rigged in favor of Trump's candidates. Something else is going on besides the war against drugs, and it's about lining up the governments of Latin America to be proxies of Israel in the region.
Right. And now you have Russia and China saying they're kind of stepping back. So I think you're right about that. The CIA's deep involvement here. People in the chat room are like, of course. I knew it was the CIA. Of course it's the CIA and the meddling here. I really think we are, a country sadly in massive decline. You know, I'd love to think about liberty in this country, but I really think, well, what does Dr. Ron Paul think about the state of liberty? I mean, your whole show is called the Liberty Report. Where is it? Is it a gone cause now in the United States?
I don't think it's gone, but it's suffering some blows. People would like to they would like to trade a little bit of their liberty for security, and the fact is, you're left with neither if that happens. And what Dr. Paul actually said on the show today is this is a case of blowback. You're training people. You're training the CIA is training people in these countries. You get blowback. They are over here. This is what he said about a 9/11 because we were over there, and we haven't learned these lessons. We can't keep going over there and fomenting this kind of chaos and not expect it to come back to our shores.
There's some ripping in the background, Daniel, because maybe, Philip, you can take the slider cam shot here if you would, because we just got this for the studio. It's about to go up on our walls. Any society that will give up a little liberty to gain a little security will deserve neither and lose both. Benjamin Franklin.
Awesome.
Well, and it's also shocking to me how many people are buying into the we've had the same narrative. How many times do we have to be lied into a war before people see the pattern? Like, how can, like, I just don't understand how that's like this. No, this is different. This is different. No, it's not.
Well, yeah, I mean, because most of these people like watch Fox News, and they're just part of this manufacturing. We saw it with the Iran hit, right? The 12-day war with Iran, like Sean Hannity out there saying this is the greatest moment for America. We just destroyed their entire nuclear arsenal. And no, you didn't. You're lying. But you're going right back to your Iraq War playbook right on national television. So these people tune in to CNN or Fox News. And that's why, and they suppress our show and in independent media. Because unless if you're not a cheerleader, you won't be amplified. You'll be suppressed. That's at the heart of it, right, Daniel?
Well, these programs are completely corrupted by generals who are on the take, who are getting paid to go up there and talk up these wars. They're representing the military-industrial complex. Thank God for shows like The Redacted, and it's wonderful to see it grow because people are realizing they're being served a shit sandwich and being told it tastes good, and It doesn't taste good anymore. We want to have a turkey sandwich for a change. Damn it!
Right. When you've got like General Jack Keane on Fox News and like, General, we want to go to you. Like, what's the latest happening here with Venezuela? Of course they're on the payroll. And they get put airtime when we go to war. I mean, that's part of the process. I mean, it's deeply disturbing and deeply disgusting. But our audience is awake and hopefully aware of this and not falling for this propaganda. And I know your audience is awake as well. You must watch the Liberty Report with Daniel McAdams and Ron Paul. It's a great show. I mean, just you want to cut through the smoke and the bullshit and the shit sandwiches. Tune in to Daniel. Daniel, great to see you as always. Thank you so much.
Thanks so much for having me. Great to see you guys.
Growing up, we were young. We were like kids. We didn't know what was going on. I was born in 1999. I see the world. I see, oh, there's war. What is happening? Must be bad guys and good guys. And then you grow up and you learn that it's actually we're the bad guys in this situation. We're the ones stealing their resources. We're the one who are raping and pillaging these people and their countries. One of the shining stars of the U.S. Congress's program for English language learners, this congresswoman out of, you guessed it, Florida, Maria Elvira Salazar. She got off a boat from Havana, or she got off, I don't know where she got off, her family got off from, but clearly her family was probably kicked out of a country because they were like, I don't know, financially exploiting the people there. I don't know. Maybe they're operating on behalf of the CIA or the State Department there. Could be any number of things at this point. But she has found herself in the U.S. Congress, and I'm going to show you this. She accidentally said the quiet part out loud regarding Venezuela. The question on everyone's mind has been, what is the U.S. doing in Venezuela? Why do they want Venezuela so much? Well, take it from Maria Salazar. The reason why they want it is because there is a $1 trillion payday if, in fact, this all comes to a stunning success for the U.S. military. Take a listen.
Americans who do not understand why we need to go in basically for three reasons. You're in Fox Business. Venezuela, for the American oil companies, will be a field day because it will be more than $1 trillion in economic activity. American companies can go in and fix all the oil pipe, the whole oil rigs, and everything that has to do with the Venezuelan petroleum companies, or everything that has to do with oil and the derivatives. Number two, Americans who do not understand.
I like how she also struggles to like even understand how they're going to make $1 trillion. She's like, well, we're going to send the American oil companies in. I would respond by saying, ma'am, you already know that Chevron is there and accounts for 25% of Venezuela's daily oil output, right? Like the country produces 1 million barrels of oil per day. Chevron accounts for 25% of that. And I mean, we could do more. We could do more without war because, of course, President Maduro has offered that. He said, you know, we're happy to sign a 100-year lease for Chevron to operate in our beautiful country. And we hope that we have more fair deals that come to our desk for me to sign off on. The United States is the #1 import-export partner of Venezuela. So this is really silly because the whole idea here from Maria Salazar, the point that she is admitting, the point that we have all long discussed, is that this is not about the free market. If this was about the free market, then, well, the U.S. would just give out more licenses for companies other than Chevron to do more business in Venezuela. No. This is not about the free market. This is about corporate socialism, if you will. People say we can't have socialism because that means it's a planned economy. Hey, buddy, wake up. What do you think the U.S. economy is? It is a planned economy, but it is a planned economy for BlackRock. It is a planned economy for Vanguard. It is a planned economy for the Ellison family. It is a planned economy for Wall Street. It is a planned economy for all of the financial levers of power that are in good with the federal authorities. So what does that really mean? U.S. policy is going to dictate that we send young American boys to go die in what is going to be worse than Vietnam inside a guerrilla war in Venezuela, a country that is over 50% larger than Ukraine. So if you think Russia's struggling in Ukraine, imagine what the United States is going to face in Venezuela, a country that has been preparing for this war for years and has 2 million people and their Bolivarian People's Militia, and they've got a standing army of active duty of 350,000. I personally don't think that the U.S. Marine Corps is going to do a stunning job here, but they are going to dictate U.S. policy to go send your boys, your daughters to their deaths in Venezuela so they can rape and pillage the Venezuelan economy and steal their oil for pennies on the dollar. Oh, we get a $1 trillion payday. No, you don't get a $1 trillion payday. American citizens are not going to get a $1 trillion payday. Wall Street is going to get a $1 trillion payday.
And why we need to go in basically for three reasons. You're in Fox Business. Venezuela, for the American oil companies, will be a field day because it will be more than $1 trillion in economic activity. American companies can.
She must have immigrated to this country after the Iraq War because selling people a war based upon the claim that we're all going to be rich because there's so much oil there. Yeah, that doesn't really work anymore. Doesn't really work anymore, especially for Gen Z who, yes, we grew up in the middle of that war. That's all we saw. And we were told one thing about it as we were growing up. We were young. We were like kids. We didn't know what was going on. You know, I was born in 1999. I see the world. I see, oh, there's war. What is happening? Must be bad guys and good guys. And then you grow up and you learn that it's actually we're the bad guys in this situation. We're the ones stealing their resources. We're the one who are raping and pillaging these people and their countries. Okay. So she must have gotten off the boat from whatever country. Maybe she fled from Colombia after Gustavo Petro was elected. That's a serious possibility here. Maybe she was taking English language courses with the CIA in Bogota before Gustavo Petro came in. Then she came and became a member of Congress. She doesn't understand the whole thing that like Americans now understand that wars based on oil profits, the prospective oil profits, is not something that we're going to get behind. It's why, according to a new CBS YouGov poll that was released this week, 70% of the American public opposes war on Venezuela. You can imagine that. 70% out of Gen Z, 77% of Gen Z opposes war on Venezuela. Despite those facts, this is what Donald Trump said today.
And we'll be starting to stop them by land also. The land is easier, but that's going to start very soon. We warn them, stop sending poison to our country. And we'll be starting to stop them by land also. The land is easier.
Maybe someone should explain to Trump that it is actually easier to strike random fishing boats in the territorial waters of Venezuela, yes, but territorial waters that are miles and miles and miles off the coast of Venezuela or Colombia or Trinidad and Tobago in some cases. There's no air defense teams out, 50 miles, 60 miles off the coast of Caracas, Trump. What does he mean land is easier? Tell that to the U.S. Air Force and see what they think. Does the U.S. Air Force believe that it is easier to fly over a target in Caracas where they have ample air defense? They have some advanced air defense. We don't really know what they have because the Russians sent an Ilyushin military cargo jet. Maybe there's military personnel from Russia there. Maybe they unloaded some new air defense systems. Something tells me the U.S. Air Force is going to laugh in Trump's face if he were to tell them that striking on land is easier than striking in the sea. Of course, they could use submarines. They could use the various Navy assets in the region, the USS Gerald R. Ford, for example. Yes, they could do that. But on those aircraft carriers, they have a lot of aircraft, and one would assume that they want to use those aircraft. You don't consume all that fuel and resources and manpower for weeks and weeks on end to just have an aircraft carrier for the fun of it. So I don't know, Trump. Ask the Air Force. Is it easier to strike territorial waters 100 miles off the coast of a country, or is it easier to strike where you have ample air defenses? And by the way, Venezuela also has an Air Force of their own. In no way, shape, or form is it comparable to even the level of fighter jets that the U.S. has on these two aircraft carriers, but they do have an Air Force. And regardless of how advanced it is still not going to be, this is an existential fight for the Venezuelan state. And the idea that they're just going to go down without a fight is insane. Maduro is ordering the Air Force to be alert, ready, and willing to defend Venezuela. And the military is not changing its tune, or not changing Maduro's tune as they come out and give their statements. Venezuelan Defense Minister Vladimir Pedrino Lopez publicly warned that the country is ready to fight any aggressor, a clear hint at Donald Trump's recent harsh statements. Do not make the mistake of attacking Venezuela. The people and the armed forces are ready to respond. We are ready for anything. At the same time, Nicolas Maduro ordered the country's Air Force to stay alert, ready, and prepared. I can't tell you today, but someday I will tell you. I don't know any crazy secrets, but someday I will tell you all just how seriously Venezuela is taking this. And I don't know if you'll be shocked, but you'll understand how locked in they are right now based on the little information that I know, just from friends I have there who are, not even in the military. I just it's crazy. They are locked in right now. And you have these congresswomen talking about $1 trillion payday. I can't wait till we get that. Okay, here's the last little video. Food for thought I want to leave you with as we end this story.
Russia has finally entered the battlefield to assist Venezuela against the United States. Russia's Ilyushin Il-76 giant cargo landed today in Venezuela's capital, Caracas, carrying 50 tons of supplies and 200 personnel. Let me tell you, this cargo plane is globally famous for delivering rockets, helicopter parts, warheads, military equipment, and it can supply S-400 systems. Apparently, all these supplies have now reached Venezuela. For the
Clarify that point, whoever made this AI video. There is no indication that S-400 systems are in Venezuela.
S-400, it's being reported that 2 to 3 more trips will be needed. I should also mention that
They mentioned that.
This Il-76 completed a 2-day journey to reach Venezuela, passing through Germany, Algeria, Morocco, and Mauritania. This mission also serves as a moral support gesture. Moreover, they stated that Russia's military support and supplies will be fully available to Venezuela. While Ukraine is receiving support from Europe, NATO, and the United States in the Russia-Ukraine war, Russia will definitely support Venezuela. As I mentioned before, 80 to 90% of Venezuela's military equipment is Russian-made. Now, only the U.S. troops and F-35s are monitoring the Caribbean Sea in Latin America, and an attack could happen at any moment.
There you have it. We also have Russian Duma members overseeing defense policy saying things like there are no legal barriers to send originics to Venezuela. Obviously, that has not happened, but it is it's quite the message to the United States. Back off. We are not going to entertain this endless warmongering any longer. Before you leave, I want to say thank you for the support, because after 2 years of being banned, we are
Hello, I'm Larry Johnson, and welcome to this special episode of Counter Currents. Instead of interviewing one of the more notable people I know, I want to talk today about what's really going on in Venezuela. Try to put this into perspective. All of this is taking place against the continuing drama, kabuki theater regarding a Donald Trump peace plan for Ukraine. And I may talk about that a little bit at the end. But that peace plan is dead on arrival. It's going nowhere. But with Venezuela, there's something else afoot. And to understand this, we need to go back into the 1980s. When I was at the Central Intelligence Agency in the 1980s, it was fairly commonly known. I worked on the Latin American side of the house. I worked both with the Directorate of Operations as well as with my final post was with the Directorate of Intelligence. And it was pretty widely known that Carlos Andrés Pérez, who was then president of Venezuela, was a CIA paid asset. And at the time, the U.S. primary interest in Venezuela, to be candid, was keep the oil companies happy and screw the people, making sure that the people of Venezuela had a good life and were prosperous and doing what? No. That wasn't a priority at all for the United States. So come 1991, thereabouts, we begin to get, there's this fellow named Hugo Chavez, who is in the military. And Mr. Chavez notes that the situation with economic turmoil, hyperinflation that exceeded 30%, a poverty rate of over 50%, and this all taking place with falling oil prices. It exposed, it was a complete failure of this this party that was called the Punto Fijo Pacto. But, they failed to deliver the goods to the people of Venezuela. And so Chavez attempted a coup. It failed. And sort of like, I don't mean to draw up a Hitler analogy, but in the same way that Adolf Hitler's beer hall putsch of Munich failed and he went to prison and he wrote Mein Kampf and became popular out of that, Chavez, too, was sent to prison for 2 years. And during that time, his popularity grew. And it grew to the point that he finally, when he got out of prison after 2 years, and he could no longer participate in the military, he was barred from that, he became a civilian politician, campaigned and won in 1999. So this 1999 victory, the victory actually took place December 6, 1998. But by 1999, he's fully installed. I'll just note parenthetically that another person who came to power in August of 1999 was a fellow by the name of Vladimir Putin. I'm not suggesting that Putin and Chavez were working together at the time. I'm just saying that they came into power at the same time. Now, Chavez was inaugurated on February 2nd, 1999, and he began trying to address the great economic pain the people of Venezuela were suffering from. And he was successful. And he started, but in 2001, 2 years after coming into office, he started making moves to take control of the PDVSA, but Petróleos de Venezuela, and there were U.S. oil companies that were profiting from that business. Well, Chavez mistakenly, from the U.S. standpoint, was taking that away from the capitalist world, and but he succeeded in wresting control from the Western Oil Company and devoting the profits that were coming out of that with to the Venezuelan people, and he was enjoying stratospheric popularity. So in 2000, by the time of 2006, that Venezuela stopped cooperating with the United States on both anti-drug and counterterrorism policies. But again, more of this was a pushback against U.S. interference in Venezuela. The CIA had been a long time interfering in Venezuela. And, at that point, they designated 4 members of Chavez's government as international terrorists and narcotics traffickers who were aiding the FARC guerrillas with weapons and drugs. Now, FARC, the Fuerzas Armadas Revolucionarias de Colombia, FARC, is a Colombian revolutionary group that had moved back and forth across the border into Venezuela and had received arms and support via Venezuela, but not officially from the government per se, but more through, let's call them enterprising entrepreneurs. So by 2011, now with Barack Obama in office, there were further sanctions imposed on Chavez. And then in 2014, the U.S. government gets involved further with Congress passing the Venezuelan Defense of Human Rights and Civil Society Act. And this was authorizing sanctions on officials responsible for, quote, violence against protesters and human rights abuses. Now, you may find this surprising. All right, folks, hold on just a second. We've got something important to share with you. First off, a big thank you for all your incredible support. Our team's been putting in the hours, really working hard to bring you insightful guests, new and improved formats, solid, high-quality analysis every week. Our next goal, hitting that 100,000 subscriber mark and getting that silver button. Let's make it happen together. Every like, comment, share, and subscription truly helps us grow and keep improving. All right then, let's get back to the video. But the USAID and the CIA were involved with working with opposition groups, trying to promote protests, trying to undermine the government of Hugo Chavez. There was never a point in which the United States actually sought to have a mutually beneficial relationship with Chavez. It was one based upon confrontation. And this continued during the Obama administration. And then, by this time, by 2017, Maduro Chavez has died, Maduro's in power, and Trump imposes additional sanctions on Maduro, and again, the United States claims that the election was stolen by Maduro. Maybe it was, but the United States is a rock thrower living in a glass house. On that point, we've had multiple years of interference in foreign elections. Now, there's an interesting story that's been circulated by Emerald Robinson, and I like Emerald, and relying upon Gary Bernson. Gary's a former CIA officer. I know Gary. I've always considered him a friend. And Ralph Pizzullo. But, they're claiming that Venezuela was a part of some global plot to undermine the U.S. election, to electronic voting machines. Look, this is all nonsense. If anybody was involved with developing voting machines, electronic machines to manipulate elections, it was my old organization, the Central Intelligence Agency. It wasn't Venezuela. Venezuela actually was not out campaigning to interfere in the affairs of other countries. It was really fighting back against what was persistent interference from the United States. And this has continued up to this day. Now, the term we've heard a lot about, Tren de Aragua. Tren de Aragua is allegedly be some massive, drug trafficking organization. But when you go back and search for, when did it first appear? Well, it pops up in 2018. Now, in 2018, a number of things happened in the United States. Publicly, Trump signed an executive order blocking Venezuela digital currency, and it banned debt purchases, and it targeted also the gold sector and corruption, supposedly. I also believe that there was a secret CIA finding signed in 2018, giving the CIA permission to overthrow and destroy the government of Maduro. That started in 2018, and one of those elements in that CIA plot was Tren de Aragua, the creation of Tren de Aragua. We see that news stories start popping up in places like Peru and Argentina about Tren de Aragua. Well, can I prove this? No, but I believe that those stories were planted by the Directorate of Operations, the Latin American Division of the Central Intelligence Agency. And this was part of a broader plot to create an information war against Maduro, as well as to try to recruit actors within Venezuela who would act on behalf of the United States against Maduro. And we had, the open recruitment of Juan Guaido, and declaring that he was the legitimate president of Venezuela, and bringing him to Washington for Trump's State of the Union address. You had the old Iran-Contra Cold Warrior, Elliot Abrams, leading the charge to try to take out Maduro. It all failed. So jump ahead now. We're back with Donald Trump in office. And he has not let go of this desire to oust Maduro. And it's all, look, this isn't anything to punish for Venezuela for election interference. This is about oil, gas, gold, and other rare earth minerals. This is about bringing Venezuela once again under the control of the U.S. financial sector so that Venezuela would be compelled to share its wealth with the United States. Now, Trump has run into some problems. Yeah, the CIA is actively and has been actively working, trying to bribe military officers, as they successfully did back in 2003 prior to the invasion of Iraq, where senior Iraqi military officers were basically paid off not to perform. So far, it looks like the CIA has not had any success on that front. because the Venezuelan military understands exactly what's afoot, that this is one more effort being played out by the United States to try to control so they can rape and rob the people of Venezuela. This is not about promoting democracy. And I'm not here to suggest that, Hugo Chavez or Maduro, Vicente Maduro, were, great beacons of democracy and protectors of human rights. But there's also always a context that the U.S. efforts to portray it as a one-sided abuse by Venezuelans ignores the role that the United States played overtly and covertly in trying to undermine that government. The United States faces a real challenge now. It has deployed significant military forces off the coast of Venezuela. It has conducted, in my view, and in my opinion, an illegal attacks on boats that they claim are carrying drugs. I would simply ask you just to use your logic with respect to the very first boat that the United States destroyed more than a month and a half ago. It was a 60-foot boat with 4 outboard motors, described as a cigarette boat, but it wasn't like your conventional cigarette boat. It was actually open, not closed over. It had 11 people on board. Now, the range of that boat is supposedly smuggling drugs to the United States, except this boat only has a capacity to go 250 miles before it would need to be refueled. And the distance from the North Shore of Venezuela to the United States is over 1,300 miles. There's no way the boat could get there. And if it was going to be refueled by carrying fuel on board, there wouldn't be any room for drugs, number one, because the number of jerry cans that would be required to be hauled would be significant. And, this is not a boat with the kind of creature comfort you'd need for a 1,300-mile journey. You do have to stop and go to the bathroom. You do want to get something to eat once in a while. So this is not a boat for that kind of operation. Is there a lot of smuggling activity that goes on down in that part of the world? Yes, absolutely. Cigarettes, liquor, other electronic items. There's a lot of smuggling. But given my experience working with U.S. military special operation forces, starting in actively scripting exercises in 1994, I saw hundreds, really more than 200 examples of rules of engagement for possible operations. I never saw a single authorization to attack a boat just because we believed there were bad people on it carrying drugs. The proper way to handle that is you stop the vessel. If in the course of stopping the vessel then opens fire and attacks U.S. forces, then you blow the boat away. But most, I base this on conversations with Coast Guard enlisted and officers. Most of the time when the Coast Guard would make these stops, they'd board the boats. And if they discovered contraband, illegal drugs, they'd seize the drugs and arrest the crew. And then they would be given a chance to cooperate or go to prison. To do it. Just killing, extrajudicial killings without any kind of due process it may feel good, but it's wrong and it's evil. And Donald Trump, right now is trying to make an issue of, there have been 6 members of Congress. At least one of them is, a retired naval officer, and they basically called upon U.S. military personnel. If you're given an order to go out and kill people on boats that have not threatened to kill you, they haven't said it this explicitly, but this is the essence of what they're saying. They're calling upon U.S. military to disobey those orders. That is an unlawful order. I would argue it is a lawful order, and that those personnel should refuse to carry it out. But unfortunately, we've got too many sheep in the U.S. military who are willing to kill people that are likely just fishermen, who are not drug traffickers and who are not kingpins. But this killing for killing's sake is unfortunately part of the death cult that the United States has become, and it's wrong. The urgency about trying to carry out a military operation against Venezuela is running into problems. Number one, when you alert the size of military forces and try to keep them actively engaged, their readiness level declines over time. That's number one. As I've commented on other podcasts, I saw the U.S. went through a similar phenomenon trying to take out Manuel Noriega, where then more than a year before we launched the invasion of Panama in December of 1989. Even before we did that, there had been efforts by the CIA to both entice, suborn members of Noriega's government to turn against him, as well as to create incidents that would provoke a response from the Panamanians that then we could use to justify attacking. And I saw this firsthand. The Panama analyst sat right behind me in my cubicle at CIA. And she was very actively involved in getting briefed by the DO what they were doing, because this was an organized effort to overthrow a guy that we had recruited, that had been run by the CIA. Manuel Noriega had been a CIA asset, so let's not pretend that he was just some authentically evil bad guy that just came out of nowhere. Well, we're trying to do the same thing in Venezuela, but with not much success. And I'm sure there are at least some smart people at the Pentagon, at Southern Command, that can look at a map and realize Venezuela is a country that's twice the size of Iraq. It is a country filled with mountains, tropical jungle, tropical rainforest, very difficult terrain to traverse, with rivers, wetlands, swamps. So if you go back and compare our operation in Iraq in 2003 with 130,000 troops, even though the United States took control of Baghdad fairly quickly within 5 to 6 weeks, it did not quell or control the population. Civil order broke down, and the Iraqis started an insurgency. In my judgment, if the United States were to try a similar operation in Venezuela, we would face a far more severe and lethal insurgency by different guerrilla elements in Venezuela and those who would come from Colombia and from Brazil. The other thing to recognize, though, is unlike the 130,000 troops we had mobilized that entered Iraq in March 2003, right now we only have 18,000 troops, mostly Marines, parked off the coast of Venezuela. That force is not big enough or strong enough or capable enough to enter Venezuela and take control of key roads, key sites. In fact, it's worth noting that Venezuela militarily far more capable than the Houthis. They have if you will, a historical tradition that these guerrilla movements can melt into the jungles and then come out and attack and destroy U.S. targets and U.S. personnel. The fact of the matter that Venezuela is twice as large as Iraq, and that we actually don't have a force comparable to what we used in Iraq, tells me that this is just either it's silly saber rattling on Donald Trump's part, or if he is actually intent on inserting U.S. military forces, it will be the end of his presidency. It will turn into a military disaster, a debacle. And those officers in the chain of command who go along with this will be guilty of misconduct and of following an unlawful order. This attempt by the Trump administration to bully military officers who are, even those who are now retired, because they simply speak up and point out that in this particular case, what's being done off the coast of Venezuela is illegal. It's not authorized under U.S. law, but it's being done. And when it's being done in the name of the American people, it implicates as well the American people in what I consider to be a war crime. So I think right now the Trump administration, despite rattling the saber, despite threatening to attack Venezuela, recognizes that such an attack would put them in a position of being viewed as impotent, because it's not going to cause the collapse of Venezuelan society or the Maduro government. Even if they kill Maduro, there will be others to step up and take his place. The prospects for a civil war in Ukraine, in Venezuela at that point, would be very significant. So I think we're going to see Trump try to move for a more negotiated escape plan to try to cut a deal with Maduro. I don't know if that's possible, but the effort to get Maduro to flee and to give up power in Venezuela, I think is going to fall short. I hope you found this worth your time.
Corbyn. I have no idea what he's going to do next, but I wish him every success and happiness in the rest of his life. Not that I owe him anything, quite the contrary, but I nonetheless sincerely mean what I have just said. It is the 11th hour. It's the 11th hour in Venezuela. The mass of the Venezuelan people are now armed. They're armed with small arms. They're armed with anti-tank weapons. They're armed with shoulder-borne anti-aircraft weapons. They are armed with artillery. They are armed with RPGs. They are armed with grenades. They are armed with every piece of weaponry that you would need in a guerrilla war, which may very well begin even in the course of this program. As someone famously said, I think Garland Nixon, my good friend from the United States, Venezuela is jungles and mountains with jungles, as well, of course, as the narrow alleyways of Caracas and other towns and cities in Venezuela. It has millions of people now under arms, and they are waiting for a Yankee invasion, which Donald Trump, the peace president, the no new wars president, the man who wanted to talk and negotiate on 8 or was it 12 different wars, the man that was ready to talk to the little rocket man, Kim Jong-un, the man that was able to negotiate with the Ansar Allah armed forces in the Yemen, the man that was ready to talk to Iran, is not ready to talk to President Nicolas Maduro. He says he is, but only to tell him that it would be better if he now left the country before President Trump was forced to kill him. The pretext for this imminent invasion of Venezuela is, as I said in my introduction, the thinnest since Adolf Hitler claimed that he was invading Poland because Poland had invaded him. And he had even strewn some corpses on the German border, claiming that they were the victims of Polish aggression. Everybody laughed at that pretext then, but they're not laughing now, because it was the precursor to a global world war, World War II, which left almost 100 million dead and overshadowed the world for most of the time that I have been alive. What's overshadowing us now is the danger, not of World War II, but of World War III, which of course will leave no survivors at all. No one will have their lives shadowed by the outcome of World War III. Everyone will be dead. There will be some who will have purchased some subterranean nuclear shelter, but it will not have been worth the money, worth the trouble. Because even if you ever emerged from it, you would emerge to a nuclear winter, which will blight all life for all time on the planet Earth. I'm not exaggerating about that, though it seems to me sometimes that people think I am. Well, if I tell you that Venezuela may well have acquired a nuclear weapon in the course of these months that Donald Trump has been threatening it, you'd realize just how dangerous and how close the world would then be, if that turned out to be the case, would then be to a nuclear exchange in the Americas. Russia is a close ally of Venezuela. So is China. So is Iran. And so is the DPRK, North Korea. And it is reported by sources that the DPRK have provided President Maduro and the legitimate government of Venezuela with a nuclear weapon, which they may use in defense of their country if Donald Trump invades it. Now, I have no way of knowing the veracity of that story, but I do, of course, know that if they have such a weapon, Venezuela would be entirely legally entitled to use it. Donald Trump's pretext for invading a sovereign country, violating for weeks, if not months, the sovereign waters of that country, illegally declaring a no-fly zone over that country, telling all aircraft not to fly, beginning a series of terrorist attacks against the infrastructure of Venezuela, and openly from the Oval Office, threatening to invade Venezuela, gives Venezuela the absolute right of self-defense with any means necessary. Do people understand that? Do they understand that Venezuela will fight, and that they will fight for years, long after Donald Trump and the Nobel Peace Prize President Machado is installed in the Miraflores? Believe me, the Venezuelans will fight, and their children will fight, and their children will fight, because these are the people of Simon Bolivar. They did not seek to unite Latin America. They did not drive out the Spanish colonizer so that a Yankee colonizer could take their place, so that their oil, their gold, their minerals, their precious things, their precious land and waters can be exploited by Donald Trump's cronies. Are you crazy? You must be, if you think that this is not going to turn into a Latin Vietnam. I've been watching a lot of movies about Vietnam this week. It's true that the United States was able to deal devastating violence on Vietnam and Cambodia and Laos they were from the sky well able to eviscerate millions of human beings, to soak the jungles of Vietnam with chemical weapons and napalm, setting the jungles alight, and the deforestation and the birth defects caused by these chemical weapons still visible in the maternity wards of Vietnam today. It's true. The United States knocked hell out of Vietnam, but Vietnam prevailed. And the United States Armed Forces, and you cannot conquer a country without boots on the ground, suffered 58,000 dead Yankees in Vietnam, hundreds of thousands of wounded physically and mentally, millions of crimes and suicides committed over the rest of the lives of the people who never recovered from being a U.S. soldier in Vietnam. Prepare yourselves for all of that again. I promise you, Donald, I promise you that. Now, the one good thing you could say about Donald Trump, he's definitely trying to end the war in Ukraine. I know there are people who don't believe him. I know there are people who don't like me believing him, but I happen to believe him. For whatever reason, I have no idea what the genuine reason would be, but I am persuaded that Trump is seeking to bring about the end of the Ukraine war. He'll try and do it as much in his own interest as he possibly can. He'll try and do it to, I don't know, palliate the concerns of some in his own party, Miss Linda Graham, for example. He'll try and find face-saving formulae to wrap up what will be nonetheless seen across the rest of the world as a monumental victory for the people of the Russian Federation, for the people of the former republics of the Donbass, for the armed forces of the Russian Federation, for the workers on the home front of the Russian Federation, and for those people who stood up when things were tough and declared, as I did on Tucker Carlson and do again now, I do not want to go to war with Russia. The Ukraine war is over. Stop game playing, cosplaying. Stop it before our people get even more hurt than they've already been. Stay tuned. It's the mother of all talk shows.
Prefers to refer to himself and the orders to kill people on these boats in the Caribbean and elsewhere. I got to tell you that Larry Johnson, our mutual friend, did a great research piece over the weekend on the retired American generals still insisting that Ukraine can win this war or fight to a draw. And it's totally under my skin. Not Larry's work. I'm glad he did it. We went back. We looked at what they said. Why are some of these people, Jack Keane, David Petraeus, Ben Hodges, why are these retired four stars still uttering defiance of reality?
It's not because of their, military expertise, because if they actually drew upon their military expertise, they'd understand, the military reality, which is the Ukrainian army has been defeated. I mean, we're looking at literally the collapse as we speak. This is the culminating moment that we've been talking about for some time. It has been reached. There is no coming back from this. Every day it gets worse for the Ukrainians. They lose more people. The Russians gain more advantages. So you have to say, well, if they're not drawing upon their military expertise, what is it? And the answer is simple, and I apologize, but they're whores. They've sold their souls to their respective media outlets. These are people who make money on a contract basis. You know how it works, Judge. You know how Fox News would bring in these talking heads. I was one of them. I was recruited by Fox News to be a talking head. They didn't like what I had to say, so they kept the contract but wouldn't allow me on air. That was a way to silence me. But
same thing happened to Larry Johnson. The exact same thing.
Yeah, I mean, it's the game that's played. But these guys are smart enough to know that as long as they say what their respective media outlets want them to say, they'll get paid, and they're probably going to get paid quite well. And this is it. There is no logical, ethical, moral, or professional reason for them to be saying what they're saying. This is because they have literally sold their souls to the corporate media devil, and they're just simply saying that which their media masters tell them.
How bad off is the Ukrainian military as we speak?
There's no reserves left. Their best brigades are being devastated. They're surrounded in Prokofsk, Kupiansk, and elsewhere. Slaughtered, not being allowed to retreat. I mean, they're in their death throes as we speak. All up and down the lines, you see Ukrainian forces, in Zaporozhye, the Russians have a major breakthrough because one of the Ukrainian brigades just collapsed and quit. And the Russians were able to exploit that and outflank a very key, important fortified defensive position in a city that I can't pronounce. I'm sorry, I wish I could, but Holiopol or something of that nature. But we're seeing this everywhere. There are no reserves left. What they have are untrained, and not just untrained, but unprepared. For instance, the units that are being brought in right now, the tanks, the armored vehicles, etc., don't have any counter-drone capability put on that. They don't have any electronic warfare capability. They don't have the screens, the netting, the spikes, anything that could be used to prematurely detonate these FPV drones. And there are no defensive positions for them to go to. So they are being brought in and told to counterattack immediately. That's the only tool the Ukrainians have left. Bring them in, counterattack the Russians in an effort to disrupt the Russian offensive operations. But Russian drone dominance extends 20 kilometers into the Ukrainian rear. So as these formations approach, they're just being slaughtered, devastated by Russian drones, killing everybody. And that's just the reality of it. There's not a single place on the line where the Ukrainians are prevailing. All up and down the line, the Ukrainians are being outflanked, surrounded, slaughtered. And that's just it. There's nobody to replace them. There's no manpower left. And, it's all she wrote.
Is it likely that the CIA is aware of what you've said and has accurately informed the president and he knows it? Or is he still being influenced by Sebastian Gorka, the soon-to-be departed General Kellogg, and the hopelessly sidelined Marco Rubio?
No, I think the day of Kellogg is over. He had his moment after Alaska, after the Alaskan summit. He made one last surge to whisper sweet nothings in Trump's ear. Trump doubled down with how the Russians are losing all these people. They can't do it, and the Russians set him and Marco Rubio straight. We still don't know the details of the phone call between Lavrov and Rubio, but Rubio tried to play the Kellogg hand. We know things are bad for you. You have no choice. The Russians said, pound sand. We're slaughtering them. You know this. You know the reality. And as a result, you know why we're not going to yield. There's no reason for us to yield on any of our points. And Rubio was set straight. And today what we see is Kellogg's out. These people don't count. Trump knows. This is why he tells Zelensky, accept the deal because you're going to lose everything. Imagine that. The president of the United States telling the president of Ukraine, you're going to lose everything because he now knows the truth. The truth is Russia is dominating the battlefield. There's nothing Ukraine can do. And there's nothing the United States or Europe can do to change this outcome. Donald Trump knows this. So he knows he's in a race against the clock, that the longer Ukraine drags its feet, the more likely it is Russia is going to obtain everything it wants through force of arms, which is what Vladimir Putin said Russia's ready to do.
Why would the Kremlin negotiate when they're on the cusp of achieving all their military goals?
Because war is an extension of politics by other means. Military goals aren't the end objective here. The end objective is a European security framework that brings stability to Europe. Not, understand that if Russia wins, dominates on the battlefield, that might make certain people very happy. I know Gilbert Doctorow would be happy, the decapitation scenario. The reason why Putin doesn't do it is that Putin's smarter than Gilbert Doctorow. He's smarter than all the people that are looking for a decisive Russian military victory. Russia's goal here, people need to understand this. Right now, the West does not recognize Russia's claims over Crimea or the 4 new territories of Novorossiya, Kherson, Zaporozhye, Donetsk, and Lugansk. And economic sanctions have been linked to Russia's continued occupation of these territories. What Russia wants and what Trump is apparently offering is recognition by the United States and Europe and Ukraine of the legal control of these territories by Russia in perpetuity. And
that they are, in fact, a lawful part of the Russian Federation.
Correct. And all the sanctions that are attached right now lifted. That's a strategic victory for Russia, you see. That's a long-term objective. Russia can win the war, take Odessa, take Kharkov, but as long as the sanctions are in place, there's no recognition, Russia's going to lose hundreds of billions of dollars a year in lost economic opportunity. If Russia does this right and gets the recognition of these territories, sanctions lifted, Russia's talking about accruing trillions of dollars worth of benefit over the course of the next decade. This is the strategic thinking of Vladimir Putin. This is why he's smarter than just about everybody else out there.
Okay, here is an example of neocon thinking in Congress. This will turn your stomach a little, but I need you to comment on it. I can imagine what your comments will be. This is Congressman Mike Turner, Republican of Ohio. Chris, cut number 1.
One thing that I think everybody understands is that you can't be America first and pro Russia. Because Russia is a self-declared adversary of the United States. It's fielding new advanced nuclear weapons that are specifically targeting the United States. It's constantly attacking the United States with offensive cyber. It continuously identifies both NATO and the West, the United States, as its adversary. So in this, and of course, when it identifies Ukraine as its adversary, it does so in identifying the West and the United States as its adversary. You have to understand that the balance of this peace arrangement has to be one where you have to look at Russia as a skeptical adversary.
This is the attitude that must pervade much of the Congress, Scott.
It is. It's Russophobic and grounded in ignorance. I mean, Russia has not declared itself to be the adversary. These new nuclear weapons that he's talking about, go back and look at Vladimir Putin. Again, 2016, Vladimir Putin addresses Western journalists and says, the United States withdrew from the ABM treaty. And now you're putting missile defenses. And we have to do something about that. We can't be in a situation where you build a defense that nullifies our strategic deterrent, because then we have no strategic deterrent. If you continue to do this, something will happen. Nothing. 2018, he gives a presentation where he says, these are the new weapons I am compelled to build because you withdrew from the ABM treaty. There are consequences for your actions. And now today they are starting to field these weapons. Russia didn't come out and say, hey, we're going to poke you in the eye. Russia said, you withdrew from a treaty, a foundational arms control treaty, the anti-ballistic missile treaty, and there are consequences for your actions. Turner's an idiot. He should know this. He does know this, but he's Russophobic and blind to it. We can go across everything. The expansion of NATO. It's not that Russia expanded to NATO's frontiers. NATO expanded to Russia's frontiers under the premise that Russia is an enemy. I mean, cause and effect. Newton's third law of physics applies to geopolitics as well. For every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. And right now, the West created this war in Ukraine. It's the CIA that made Ukraine a tool against Russia and has been seeking to do so ever since the end of the Second World War. Repeated CIA operations. Turner knows this, but he chooses to be ignorant along with the rest of Congress. It's Russophobia. Russophobia is the irrational fear of Russia born of the ignorance of the Russian reality. This is why you, me, Larry, and everybody else goes to Russia to capture the Russian reality, bring it back to the American people so they can see through this nonsense. Hopefully Turner's days are numbered.
Who withdrew us from the ABM treaty?
George W. Bush.
Wow.
And Donald Trump withdrew us from the INF treaty, the other foundational arms. And look at what happened. And Putin said, hey, the reason why we have a Reshnik is because you withdrew from the INF treaty. If you had stayed in the INF treaty, we wouldn't have a Reshnik today. But there are consequences for your actions.
Well, earlier today, Secretary of Defense Hegseth tweeted that he denied having authorized or ordered the killing of 2 survivors who were clinging to the remnants of their boat. These 2 guys were in one of the speedboats that the United States military had attacked. He did this because the Washington Post had reported it had 7 sources that said Hegseth issued the verbal order to kill these 2. Hegseth denied it. About an hour and a half ago, last night, the president denied it. About an hour and a half ago, the White House press secretary admitted that Hegseth did issue that order. Was the issue of the order an illegal order? And did compliance with the order constitute a war crime?
100% illegal order. Look, this is one of the clearest cases. There's no debate here. There's no gray zone. As a second lieutenant in the United States Marine Corps at the basic school, we are taught the law of war. And one of the videos they showed my class was a video of American submariners who had sunk Japanese merchant shipping. And then the submarine came around and the sailors are on the ship shooting the Japanese in the water, just slaughtering them. This was common practice in the Second World War. And because of this, the world was sickened by it. There were other things where Germans did similar things to, our sailors in the water. In fact, as many German submariners were arrested, tried, and executed for that crime. So in 1949, I believe the Geneva Conventions made it illegal to, when a ship is sunk and people are in the water, they are automatically, by law, rendered what is called hors du combat. That's a French term. Marine Corps, we say hors de combat because we don't know how to speak French. But it means you're out of the fight. You are literally out of the fight. And you are required to rescue them. They are out of the fight. You are required to rescue them, not kill them. And if you seek to kill them, you are in violation, a grave breach of the Geneva Conventions, not just the 1949 Geneva Convention, but the 1977 additional protocols. In 1996, the United States Congress passed a law, the War Crimes Act, I believe it's called, that basically says if you do this, if you violate the Geneva Convention, a grave breach, you shall be arrested, tried, and if found guilty, sentenced to life imprisonment or executed. Pete Hegseth is a war criminal. There is no if, and, or but. There is no pardoning. There is nothing. He's a war criminal, but not just him. This is where Mark Kelly and the seditious six come in. They put a reminder out there to every military officer, you are obligated not to obey. This is basic. In the Marine Corps, we were told if the enemy raises their hand, you don't shoot them. You don't shoot them. If they're wounded, you treat them. This is basically, and if somebody comes in and says, kill them, the answer is no, because it's illegal. This is pounded into our head. And yet somehow the military forgot, because Admiral Bradley, the head of the SEAL team that was operating there, the Naval Special Forces Task Group, he took Hegseth's verbal order and ordered SEAL Team 6 to kill these people who were, again, out of the fight, or du combat. They did so. So it's not just Hegseth. Bradley shall be shot until executed.
This is the admiral to whom Hegseth gave his verbal order.
Pardon?
This is the admiral to whom Hegseth must have given his verbal order. Admiral
Correct. And Bradley's only response Bradley could have said is, "No, sir, that's an unlawful order. I'm ordering my SEAL team in accordance with the UCMJ and the laws of war. We're going to go in and rescue these people. They are out of the fight. We are now going to rescue them. And if you choose to prosecute them afterwards, that's your business. But no, Secretary of War Hegseth, I will not obey that order. That's an unlawful order. End of story. And if Bradley gave that order, the SEAL team commander should have said, ain't happening, sir. You can't order me to execute people who are legally out of the fight. It's against the Geneva Convention. It's against U.S. law. I will not do this. This is why Senator Mark Kelly said, everybody refamiliarize yourself with the law. You cannot obey an unlawful order. Hegseth gave an unlawful order. He's a war criminal. Bradley repeated this, and he is a war criminal. And everybody who followed those orders, they are war criminals. I'm sorry. There's no exception to the rule.
We're running a poll during this portion of your segment. Should President Trump fire Pete Hegseth for his denial that he ordered the second strike? Yes, no, yes, but he won't. We'll let you know what the what the vote is. Why do these people like the killing? Why is Hegseth doing this?
Because he's has no moral compass. This is a man who thinks that you're strong if you're to be strong, you have to look tough and be tough. Sometimes, I mean, look, that's why we do physical training in the Marine Corps. You know, you got to be tough to back it up. But the real strength comes from your the moral integrity, the ability to know the difference between right and wrong. And see, Hegseth's job isn't, and this is the point that I tried to make, his job isn't to go out and do PT with the troops. Man, you are not a company commander or battalion XO. Okay, you're the Secretary of Defense. He's not the Secretary of War. Understand that there's no legal, that's not a legal term. Congress didn't approve of that. The Congress still passes, things for the Department of Defense. But see, Hegseth did war because he wants to sound tough, look tough, and he postures as being tough. And he has made a decision here that killing people in boats that he has designated as being affiliated with drug trafficking, that this somehow makes us tough. No, it makes you a murderer, Pete. The strongest man in war isn't the man that can pull the trigger every time. The strongest man in war is the man who knows when not to pull the trigger. And Pete Hegseth doesn't know when not to pull the trigger. He's crossed the line. Trump shouldn't fire him. Trump has a duty and responsibility to arrest him and try him for the highest crimes imaginable.
Here's President Trump on Pete's denial. Chris, cut number 6.
And Pete said he did not want them. He didn't even know what people were talking about. So we'll look into it. But no, I wouldn't have wanted that. Not a second strike. The first strike was very lethal. It was fine. And if there were 2 people around, but Pete said that didn't happen.
The first strike was a crime also. These people are on a speedboat 1,500 miles from the United States. They're non-combatants. They're civilians by definition.
Yeah, no, there's no ifs, ands, or buts about that. There are people out there who will make the case that they're unlawful combatants. But again, the term unlawful combatant can only be applied through due process. You can't go out and arbitrarily paint people with this. You need to detain them. It's the same thing in war. If I capture, for instance, look at what happened during the Battle of the Bulge when Americans captured German special forces who were in American uniforms. When they realized that they were Germans in American uniforms, they didn't execute them on the spot. That would be a war crime. They arrested them, brought them in, and there was a summary trial where they were found guilty of, committing, violations of war, and they were shot as spies. But there's due process. You don't get to be judge, jury, and executioner all at once. If there's a boat out there and there's no visible guns and you think you know what's on board, you have a duty to stop that boat, seize that boat, arrest the people, and subject them to due process. And if at the end of that time you determine they are unlawful combatants, then you can send them to Guantanamo Bay, as we did with all the other unlawful combatants that we captured during the global war on terror. But to arbitrarily kill them is a violation of international law. It's a violation of the Geneva Conventions.
Well, we'll see where this goes. The admission by Carolyn Leavitt was rather startling. We haven't heard from the president since she made the admission. I'm deeply grateful for the clarity with which you explained this, but knowing their mentalities, I worked with Pete for 7 or 8 years at Fox. Nothing's going to change unless there's some legal process to restrain him. He should be arrested and prosecuted. There's no question about it, as should Admiral Bradley, as should the SEAL Team 6 that actually pulled the trigger. What does pulling the trigger mean? They sent a missile or a drone?
I don't know the weapon system they used, whether it's a drone, whether it was a helicopter. I think it might be a drone operating under the under SEAL Team 6 control. But the bottom line is, whoever released that munition is a war criminal. That's a clear. There's literally no justification under any possible interpretation of the law that would allow them to kill. Those people are out of the fight legally, and they're protected by the Geneva Conventions. They're protected by U.S. law, and the people responsible for double tapping them are criminals, war criminals, 100%.
Scotty, thank you very much, my dear friend. Much appreciated. We'll look forward to
Donald Trump is wreaking havoc in Latin America. Number one, Donald Trump is demanding that Nicolas Maduro resign or else. So he's ready to go to war with Venezuela. Two, Pete Hegseth, who is a part of Donald Trump's administration, is possibly facing some type of charge for war crimes. He's been accused of war crimes also to do with Venezuela in the Caribbean. Three, Donald Trump is now in process of trying to pardon Juan Hernandez, who is an actual narco in Honduras. I've seen crazier things happen before, but ladies and gentlemen, Donald Trump is after Latin America. Let's go ahead and get started with this statement here from Fox News. It's been a crazy weekend. I know a lot of people with their families for Thanksgiving weekend, but this all went down while everyone was hanging out with the fam. Exit or else. The Trump administration delivered a stern ultimatum to Nicolas Maduro to leave Venezuela immediately before Trump announced the country's airspace would be closed. The warning was reportedly delivered in a phone call with Caracas and offered guarantee evacuation for Maduro, his wife, and their son, but only if the dictator agreed to resign on the spot. Ladies and gentlemen, telling Nicolas Maduro to flee his own country. Here we go again with U.S. intervention, with the U.S. government overthrowing leaders to install the Western puppets that they want. We have to remember Nicolas Maduro does not want to work alongside with Israel. He made that very clear. Marina Kochina, the woman who just received the Nobel Peace Prize, who's basically a traitor to her own people in Venezuela, she wants Venezuela to work alongside Israel and to be a part of the Zionist project. So does everybody see where this is headed? Two, to tell a country that you are closing their airspace. By the way, the airspace was closed to airlines as well. This is overreach like no other. So imagine calling Nicolas Maduro a dictator, and you are actually dictating on the world stage. Let's get into this, folks. We got to get into what this is really about. Again, Israel is part of this. So part of that's foreign policy, the geopolitics of it all, this greater expansion of Israel. But also we cannot forget that Venezuela has a lot of oil. And ultimately, Donald Trump is after that oil. He is now going so far as to say that Nicolas Maduro is a part of the drug cartel. I cannot make this up. Let's get into this clip here.
A bold move by the Trump administration declaring Venezuela's president, Nicolas Maduro, and his government among the world's most dangerous terrorist organizations. The announcement allows President Trump to move in on Venezuela, but when it will happen is still uncertain. Here's DC Bureau Chief Ben Kennedy.
Tonight, the U.S. has formally marked Venezuela's President Nicolas Maduro and his government allies as members of a foreign terrorist organization, accusing Cartel de los Soles of trafficking drugs into the states. On social media, South Florida Representative Maria Salazar said the Cartel of the Suns is officially recognized as a terrorist organization, exactly what Venezuelans have known for years.
So now, so everyone's a terrorist now. Everyone's a terrorist that doesn't want to go along with the U.S. foreign policy. So does everybody see the pattern here? For years, they have told you that these other countries are the problem, but we're the country that wreaks havoc on these other countries. We're the country that overthrows their leaders. We're the country that tells them you better do this or else. The U.S. government has been policing the world stage for decades. This didn't just happen overnight, didn't start with Donald Trump, but this is the same person who told you he wanted peace. This is why I continue to say, stop calling Donald Trump this peace president. He's not a peace president. He wasn't a peace president in his first term. But yet people believe this. I don't know why.
Adding, for too long, the Maduro regime has financed narco-terrorism and tyranny in Venezuela and throughout our hemisphere. This move gives the Trump administration broader power to target and dismantle cartels and even expand authority to take action in Venezuela, like imposing fresh sanctions against Maduro's assets and infrastructure. Maduro has denied any personal involvement in drug running. In a statement, the Venezuelan government called the designation a ridiculous fabrication, writing this new maneuver will follow the same fate as previous and reoccurring aggressions against our country: failure.
We view the Maduro regime as being illegitimate, and the president has been very satisfied with the successful strikes against narco-terrorists.
Imagine if another country said that we are going to overthrow the president of the United States. That would be insane, right? But the US government has been doing that for years. Now, they told you that the war in Iraq was about weapons of mass destruction. You found out years later that was not the case, that there were no weapons of mass destruction. But they used that as a reasoning. And now the reason that they're trying to use for Venezuela is they're trying to say, well, Nicolas Maduro is a part of this drug cartel. Donald Trump's entire reasoning falls apart because of the pardon that he wants to do for Juan Hernandez. It does not make any sense other than the fact that they want to overthrow these leaders that don't want to go along with U.S. foreign policy projects. And ultimately, they want the oil. Let's get into another clip about this, ladies and gentlemen. Like I said, it has been a crazy weekend, but we are back.
A foreign terrorist designation is going to go into effect today for Venezuela's infamous Cartel de los Soles. The White House claims the group is directly tied to the Maduro regime and is responsible for drug trafficking into the U.S. So this move allows the Trump administration to, for instance, freeze assets tied to the cartel as it makes the case for military strikes against Venezuela. Over the weekend, 3 international airlines canceled flights from Venezuela as the FAA warns of a potentially hazardous situation. The idea of military action against Venezuela is something even the president.
We have to pause it here because we can't show the strike on the boat, but we'll bring it back. And this action here by Donald Trump is just absolutely, it's insane. And people were saying he deserves the Nobel Peace Prize. No, he doesn't. He made this deal with Gaza and Israel, which isn't a ceasefire, by the way. There were 2 Palestinian children that were killed over the weekend, over Thanksgiving weekend. They're still killing people in Gaza. They're still starving people in Gaza. So that was all a distraction. That whole plan of his was all a distraction so that he can divert his attention to Latin America and start wreaking havoc there. Now, this is not liked by both sides. This is another thing. Both sides are calling this out, not just the Democrats, despite what Donald Trump will tell you, but even Republicans as well. We'll go ahead and bring in Rand Paul here because he had something to say about this as well.
I think you'll see a splintering and a fracturing of the movement that has supported the president, because I think a lot of people, including myself, were attracted to the president because of his reticence to get us involved in foreign war.
Group chat is back. Sabrina, I know you've been following this for a long time. I do know people talk about Venezuela as a narco state, but I don't necessarily, it's not clear whether designating it as a former a cartel, what difference that could make. Can you talk about like what the administration is sort of thinking behind all this?
I mean, for the Trump administration, the designation opens up more options of what they can do in Venezuela and opens a broader justification for them doing things in Venezuela right now. But I think what's interesting, there's a lot of confusion about why exactly the Trump administration would want to get involved in Venezuela and is doing what it's doing. What we hear from the administration, the majority of the time, is the focus on the drug trafficking. And I think there's another piece, which is Trump himself has talked so much about migration patterns from Venezuela. So is there some type of interest in destabilizing Venezuela, ousting its leader, Nicolas Maduro, if there's a calculus that that would impact the region, if that would impact bringing new leadership into the country?
Yeah, and
then let me add this part, because this is the piece I think a lot of people don't want to admit. When the U.S. government destroys these countries, implements more sanctions. We've had sanctions on Venezuela. He's talking about implementing more sanctions on Venezuela. Resign, Maduro, do this, otherwise I'm going to make your people suffer more. Sanctions kill people. Sanctions are an economic aspect of war. So I still consider that to be war. And when we talk about what is going to happen to the people in Venezuela, ultimately, that leads to more migration. Because the more sanctions you put on the country, if he goes into, it sounds like he's trying to head into war into Venezuela. What do you think happens to the population, the civilians who are there? They are going to migrate. They are going to leave. And see, the same administration will complain about the border and they'll say all these people are coming in, but they never explain why. They never get to the geopolitics of it all. The reality is a lot of people don't want to leave their home. Yes, some people do want to come to the United States and achieve the American dream. But the reality is most people don't want to leave their home. But when you ruin their home, when you implement sanctions so much to the point that it makes pretty much the things that you need, food, gas, water, it makes those things unaffordable, you have no choice but to leave and try to go somewhere else where you can afford to live. Imagine if it were done to us. Imagine if it were done to us and all of a sudden gas was like, let's say $20 a gallon. All of a sudden, like bread and milk was, the prices were through the roof, which the prices are already increased anyway. But imagine if it was through the roof. Ultimately, people would try to leave. People would try to go elsewhere where they can afford to live. And that is what has been happening so much in Venezuela. Now, like I said, do some people want to come here to achieve the American dream? Absolutely. But you cannot sit up here and excuse what the U.S. government has done in these countries. And here we go again. Insane.
The Times, your paper of record, the Joint Chiefs Chairman Dan came to the Caribbean as the president is said to have reportedly approved plans for covert action there. And I think for the people within the MAGA movement who don't want to be involved in foreign wars, is this starting to walk and quack like a war?
So you are seeing the tensions in MAGA just as you saw them just before the bombing of Iran in June. Now, in that case, it was a standoff bombing campaign. That's maybe what you see now against, in the coming days, against drug sites, maybe against military sites.
Yeah, against all those things, right? So again, we can't show the explosion here. But he's talking about that splinter that's happening within MAGA, like the people who really did not want any more wars, the people who wanted, the president of the United States to focus on Americans first. That's what he's diving into. And the reality is that segment of the base does still exist. And so you're seeing people like, whether it's been Candace, whether it's been Tucker, whether it's been Marjorie Taylor Greene, people vehemently come out against this and say, this is not what we voted for. And I would say that Donald Trump fooled a lot of people because he was already president in 2016. And no, he didn't start new wars, but he didn't stop the ones that were going either. Don't forget, he also implemented attacks on Syria during his first administration. People forget that. Also Somalia, right? So his hands are not clean. So we cannot forget these things, ladies and gentlemen.
Than as president of a country.
Right.
Now, it's not sure that that cartel of the Suns actually exists. And that's
rather than a figure
yeah,
of speech.
right.
Okay. And then meanwhile, I just want to say that people in the U.S. do want to know a little bit more about what's going on. They are hearing about deaths in these boat strikes. Just 24% believe the Trump administration has clearly explained their position on military action. And 76% believe that hasn't been done.
This is incompetence at its finest.
One of the big misconceptions or confusions points is that Donald Trump has gone so far in targeting fentanyl as a crisis. Fentanyl is a Chinese and a Mexican crisis that has very much less to do with Venezuela. So I think the American people are confused about how that campaign trail rhetoric matches up with these actions. And then also going to thinking broadly about the Trump administration. First, you had Gaza. He sort of, brokered that peace deal, wanted the Nobel. Now we have Russia, Ukraine. I think for a lot of people, this seems like the third opportunity for Donald Trump, opportunity being the key word, to sort of broker a crisis and solve it. Whereas if you look at polling, I think a lot of people don't want any more crisis to be brokered and solved. I think they want Trump to be focusing on domestic policy, the food stamp crisis. We just went through a government shutdown. This feels like an extracurricular thing for a lot of people.
And I think especially
there is no peace in Gaza. I have to make a correction there. But yeah, that splintering that's happening there in the MAGA base. We cannot forget the part about the oil. I want you to hear what this guy said here, who actually went to Iraq. Listen to this part here.
Venezuela, for those Americans who do not understand why we need to go in, basically for three reasons. You're in Fox Business. Venezuela, for the American oil companies, will be a field day. Because it will be more than $1 trillion in economic activity.
Well, they're just saying the quiet part out loud.
Right out there in the open. That's what it's really about. You have too much oil. We want your oil. So you step aside and resign, or we're going to come in and we're going to start a war with you. That is colonialism at its finest. We are stealing resources from other countries. And the people there, it's like they have no say so. And then if the leader of that country chooses to say no and fight back, then all of a sudden this person is a dictator. I'm surprised they haven't come up with this one yet, but give it a number of days and they'll probably start telling you that Maduro is killing his own people. Where have we heard that one before? It's thievery. Like just taking from these people.
That was Republican Representative Maria Salazar admitting on national television that the party of no new wars is about to send our children to the slaughterhouse for big oil. As an Iraq war veteran, I feel like we've done this already. And this slip up is obviously not really being covered by right-wing media outlets. As we can see on the ground news bias distribution chart, only 17% of right-leaning media outlets are covering this. I love ground news. I use it to argue with my formerly MAGA father. That's right, formerly MAGA. Together, we analyze each story's biases and we use the blind spot feature. And that makes it almost impossible for us to stay inside of our algorithmic bubble.
He goes on about ground news. Ground news is pretty decent. They do that thing that he was just talking about, where they'll tell you like this leans left, this leans right, this is more neutral. They do that, but they're pretty decent. But yeah, people are staying in their own little bubbles. It's just, I can't believe that people, or some people are even believing this nonsense that is happening. And there's something else here. I wanted to show you guys this from the Gray Zone. This was something that they said recently about this effort of Latin American takeover is really ultimately what Donald Trump is trying to do.
Essentially, this isn't about terrorism, narco-terrorism. This isn't about drugs. It's about destroying the Latin American left. And not just in Cuba and Nicaragua, but in Brazil and Mexico,
where Mexican President Claudia Sheinbaum is facing right-wing protests dressed up as a Gen Z revolution, which are just astroturfed, oligarch-funded protests where they're chanting against her being Jewish, but the ADL doesn't care because she's supportive of Palestine.
Yeah, that was the same issue with Mexico. And again, yeah, like she's not on the Israel, not down with the Israel agenda. She supports Palestine. And that's what he's doing. And ultimately, it's like more people need to pay attention to this. And again, it happened over Thanksgiving weekend, so I'm not sure a lot of people saw. And then there's part two. Now, Pete Hegseth, who's a part of the Trump administration, who was never qualified for that position. I warned people early on, this guy's not qualified. This is going to be a disaster. He is now being accused of war crimes in the Caribbean. Because remember when they were targeting those Caribbean boats and they said that those boats were coming from Venezuela and they were sending drugs into the United States and they had no proof of that. So they were killing innocent people. Well, there was that first strike, which we all knew about. Now it is being reported that there was a second strike where Pete Hegseth told them to kill them all. Cannot make this up, ladies and gentlemen. This is a big one for the Trump administration. It is not looking good. Lawmakers warn Hegseth may have committed war crimes following a second strike report. Let's get into a little bit of this here. And this is coming from both parties. Lawmakers from both parties raised alarm Sunday that Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth may have committed a war crime following a report that he ordered a follow-on attack to kill survivors of a boat strike in September. The Washington Post reported last week that Hegseth authorized a highly unusual strike to kill all survivors of one of Trump's administration's attacks in recent months on boats, allegedly carrying drugs in international waters. Politico has not independently verified the Post reporting. So people that have been speaking out against this, Senator Chris Van Hollen, Tim Kaine, both of who sat on the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, said Sunday that if accurate, such orders would rise to the level of war crimes. Let's go ahead and get into this clip here where they did confront Donald Trump about this.
Lawmakers from both sides of the aisle are demanding answers from the Trump administration about recent U.S. military operations in the Caribbean. This bipartisan scrutiny comes in the wake of new reporting from the Washington Post, claiming that during one attack on a boat suspected of smuggling drugs, a follow-up strike was ordered after the initial impact left some survivors on board. This is according to the Post, citing two sources with direct knowledge. They write, in a September 2nd strike, which is the first in the administration's ongoing offensive, Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth gave a verbal command to kill everybody on the boat. After the
pause right here, to kill everybody on the boat. They said that Pete Hegseth said, kill them all. What does that sound familiar? Doesn't it sound similar to some of the rhetoric that you heard from Zionists about the Palestinians in Gaza to kill them all? You see, it's one accord. It's one accord, ladies and gentlemen. They don't give a damn. We are dealing with a ruthless mafia-style government in this country. That's what this really is. A mafia. People are making deals under the table. People are making deals in back rooms. People are exchanging money, is exchanging hands to just do utter chaos, do whatever they want. And no one is stopping them. No one. And this is why I say, and I say this, and I said this before. Look, I have many criticisms of the Democratic Party. That being said, this is why I say Democrats are poised to win in 2028, because the havoc that has been wreaked from the Trump administration in particular, I just don't see how he comes. I don't see how they come back from this. Even if J.D. Vance decides to run in 2028, which he probably will, I don't really see how people come. A lot of people are upset, and not just people who are Democrats, not just people who are independent voters, but even people who voted for Donald Trump are not feeling what is happening. So this is a mafia style government, and Pete Hegseth is now being accused of war crimes. So you got, our government being accused of war crimes, not the first time. You have Benjamin Netanyahu, obviously, who committed war crimes. Again, that's why I say it's one accord. One accord.
Missile hit and the smoke cleared. 2 survivors were seen clinging to the wreckage. The paper goes on to report that the special operations commander overseeing the attack then ordered a second strike to comply with Hegseth's initial instructions. As the Post puts it, the 2 men were blown apart in the water. MS Now has not independently verified that report.
Again, of course, we can't show the boat strike, but this is the report that was coming out.
Congress are starting to push back. The top Republican and Democrat on the Senate Armed Services Committee said, quote, "We'll be conducting vigorous oversight to determine the facts related to these circumstances."
So this is, again, bipartisan. Donald Trump is going to tell you it's just the Democrats. It's not. You have Senator Roger Wicker, who's a Republican, and Senator Jack Reed, who's a Democrat. The committee has directed inquiries to the department, and we will be conducting vigorous oversight to determine the facts. So that's another doomsday thing here for the Trump administration. The fact that you have bipartisan support that, whoa, what they're doing here is incorrect. This is wrong. You can't just go just saying kill all these people.
And on the House side, the Armed Services Committee there echoed that vow, saying they're, quote, "committed to providing rigorous oversight and are taking bipartisan action to gather a full accounting of the operation in question." Amid this new report and stepped up scrutiny, Defense Secretary Hegseth is continuing to defend the strikes. He took to social media to denounce what he called fake news and fabricated, inflammatory and derogatory reporting. But he added that the strikes are intended to be lethal and kinetic, saying in part, quote, "Biden coddled terrorists, we kill them."
Everything is fake news. If somebody's outing them, if somebody is telling the truth here, which I believe, if somebody's outing them, it's fake news. And he'll just dismiss it this way. This is absolutely disgusting. Just killing innocent people. And I'm willing to bet you they probably have proof. They probably have audio somewhere that they recorded to show that he did say that. This is what the U.S. government has been doing for years. It's just that it's out in the open now. War crimes were committed under Bush. War crimes were committed under Obama. But now, especially in this day and age of social media and people being a little bit more aware of geopolitics, now it's out in the open.
President Trump, meanwhile, had this to say yesterday when asked about reports of a second strike.
If there were a second strike that killed wounded people wounded in the first strike, are you?
Well, number one, I don't know that happened. And Pete said he did not want them. He didn't even know what people were talking about. So we'll look into it. But no, I wouldn't have wanted that. Not a second strike. The first strike was very lethal. It was fine, and if there were 2 people around, but Pete said that didn't happen.
Does that make you?
I have great confidence.
You think no second strike?
I don't know. I'm going to find out about it. But Pete said he did not order the death of those 2 men.
Let me just go ahead and tell you guys something, okay? Donald Trump is playing people. The president knows. So for Donald Trump to say, "Oh, I don't know about that. Pete said it didn't happen. It's not true. I don't know if there was a second strike." Like, he is literally playing people. Of course he knows. The president, that they're not doing things without the president's approval or the president knowing about these things. He knows. If one thing I think Donald Trump has been very skilled at, it's being a liar. It just say, "Oh, I didn't know about that. Oh, it's fake news." And people who worship him will just eat it up because they believe anything that he says. So now you see he's trying to distance himself there and say, "Oh, I don't know anything about that. Oh, no, strike. What is that?" So this is serious. This is serious here. Then there's part 3, which is that Donald Trump is now trying to pardon Juan Hernandez of Honduras, who was an actual narco. So at the same time that Donald Trump is telling you we're going after Venezuela because they're trafficking drugs and Nicolas Maduro is connected to cartel and he's narco, he is trying to pardon an actual narco in Honduras. I cannot make these things up. The ex-president, whom Trump plans to pardon, flooded America with cocaine. Juan Orlando Hernandez, whom Mr. Trump called a victim of persecution, helped orchestrate a decades-long trafficking conspiracy. It ravaged his Central American country. So this is who Donald Trump is trying to pardon right now. But he's telling you that he has to go after Venezuela because they are trafficking drugs. This guy trafficked cocaine into the United States. And many of you wondering why. There are elections that are happening right now in Honduras. This is why I said he's wreaking havoc on Latin America. It's not just about Venezuela. He's not going to stop there. Right now, there are elections happening in Honduras. And Donald Trump has already said who he wants to win that election. It's insane. I'm going to try to get someone to come on the show Tuesday evening to discuss those Honduras elections. Camilla, she's a journalist. She's been reporting a lot on this so far on social media. She's been talking about what's happening there. But the U.S. government right now is interfering with elections in Honduras so that they can install their Western puppet. So this guy, Trump, says, oh, we're going to try to pardon him. Listen to this. He once boasted that he would stuff the drugs up the gringos' noses. He accepted $1 million bribe from El Chapo to offer cocaine shipments to pass through Honduras. A man was killed in prison to protect him. At the federal trial of Juan Hernandez in New York testimony, and evidence showed how the former president maintained Honduras as a bastion of the global drug trade. He orchestrated a vast trafficking conspiracy that prosecutors said raked in millions for cartels while keeping Honduras one of the Central America's poorest, most violent, and most corrupt countries. He went on to face drug trafficking charges. He was sentenced to 45 years in prison. But this is who Donald Trump wants to pardon. On Friday, President Trump announced that he would pardon Mr. Hernandez, who's 57, who said he was a victim of political persecution, though Mr. Trump offered no evidence to support that claim. It would be a head-spinning resolution to a case that, for prosecutors, was a pinnacle striking at the heart of a narco state. This is absolutely insane. So, and this is, I stress to people, please, please, please pay attention to what is going on out there in these global streets. It's absolutely insane what Donald Trump is doing.
Coffee. Follow me